Okay, imagine you get into an argument with your neighbor, and that argument doesn't stop for over 100 years. That's pretty much the Hundred Years' War. Today, we're going to find out why it all kicked off, how a simple piece of wood changed fighting forever, and weirdly, what it all has to do with the language you're hearing right now.
So the war that everyone calls the 100 Years' War actually went on for 116
Years, that's just ridiculous. That's longer than whole countries like the USA have even been around.
So what was this all about? Well, the official story is a war between England and France. But really, it was basically a massive, super dysfunctional family feud. For centuries, the English and French royals had been marrying each other and fighting over land. It was a mess.
Right, let's get into how this epic family drama actually started.
The whole thing ignited back in 1328. The French king Charles IV died, but he didn't have a son, so the French nobles picked one of his cousins to be the new king. Simple, right? Nope. Because over in England, King Edward III had other plans.
You see, Edward's mother was a French princess, so he basically pops up and says, hold on a second, my mom was French, so that means I've got a claim here. In fact, that throne should be mine. I should be king of France. The nerve! As you can guess, the French were not exactly thrilled with that idea.
And look, that claim was just the spark. There were tons of other problems bubbling away. France kept backing Scotland in its fights against England, which really annoyed Edward. Plus, England controlled Gascony, a super profitable French wine region, and France wanted it back. Throw in some trade squabbles and old grudges, and you've got the perfect recipe for a massive war.
And so, in 1337, that's exactly what happened. Edward III went for it, formally declared himself King of France, and the war was on.
Now here's where things get really interesting, because England had a secret weapon, something that was about to completely revolutionize warfare. Meet the English longbow. It's basically a 6-foot-tall stick of yew wood. But here's the thing, it wasn't used by knights in shiny armor. It was used by ordinary guys, farmers, tradesmen, who could fire 12 arrows a minute with deadly accuracy from 300 meters away. It was a game changer.
At the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the English archers fired 70,000 arrows every single minute. Per minute. It was an absolute storm of arrows. The French army couldn't even get close.
And the results were just devastating. Crécy was a total shock. We're talking about 2,000 of France's best, richest, most heavily armored knights just wiped out, killed by English farmers standing in a muddy field half a battlefield away. The French were completely horrified. Their whole society was built around the idea that the mighty knight was the ultimate warrior, and suddenly, they weren't. This was not how war was supposed to be fought. And then it happened again. A decade later, at the Battle of Poitiers, the English actually captured the French king himself, John II, and they ransomed him for 3 million gold crowns. 3 million. France had to pay up.
So, for decades, England was just winning and winning. But then, the tide started to turn, thanks to one of the most incredible figures in all of history.
Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl who said she heard visions telling her to save France. And people believed her. The French king gave her an army, she led it from the front, and she started winning. Tragically, she was captured in 1430 and executed by the English a year later, aged just 19. But what she started, it couldn't be stopped. By 1453, it was finished. After 116 years of fighting, England had lost pretty much everything it held in France. All they had left was one tiny port town called Calais.
So, okay, England lost a war 600 years ago. Big deal, right? Why does it still matter to us? Well, the answer is actually really surprising.
See, before the war, England's rulers basically saw themselves as French. They spoke French, they owned land in France, but losing all that forced them to focus on England, the royal court stopped speaking French, the English language took over, suddenly a proper English national identity was born. And that language that took over is the one you're listening to right now. And there were two other massive consequences. First, the longbow showed that common soldiers could beat elite knights, which basically ended that whole era of warfare. And second, losing France made England look somewhere else for power, outwards, across the oceans. It kicked off the age of exploration and, eventually, the British Empire.
All right, time for a couple of fun facts. First up, no one at the time called it the 100 Years' War. They just called it the war.
The name came from historians centuries later. Can you imagine? Every generation probably thought, oh, it'll be over soon. It never was.
Fun fact number 2, using a longbow was so physically demanding that it literally changed an archer's skeleton. Archaeologists who found skeletons of longbowmen on the warship the Mary Rose saw they had these hugely overdeveloped left arms and shoulders. You could spot an archer just by looking at their bones.
Okay, let's do a quick knowledge check. Let's see if you were paying attention.
Question 1. How long did the 100 Years' War actually last? That's right, it was a crazy 116 years.
Question 2. What was Edward III's claim to the French throne? Yep, his mother was a French princess.
Question 3. What was it that made the English longbow so darn effective? It was its incredible rate of fire and its range. Question 4. What happened to the French king at the Battle of Poitiers? He was captured and held for a massive ransom. Question 5. Who was Joan of Arc? She was that amazing teenage peasant who led the French army. And last one, question 6. What was one of the big long-term consequences for England? You got it. It helped create a strong English identity and the modern English language. Thanks so much for joining me. See you next time.